While Buddhism is an ancient religion that has mainly developed and blossomed in various Asian countries, its presence in Australia and in particular southeast Queensland is relatively recent. The Chenrezig Buddhist Institute was founded in 1974 in a rainforest near the small town of Udlo. The Buddhist monks Lama Tuban Yeshi and Lama Zopa Rinpoche visited the area in September 1974, facilitated a retreat at Diamond Valley in a makeshift gompa, and now 50 years later, this has grown to become one of the largest Buddhist centres in Australia. Chenrezig is part of the institution called the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition, or FPMT for short. This institution has many members and centres around the world, including centres in North and Latin America, Asia, Europe, Oceania, Africa, and the Middle East. The main vision for these centres is outlined by Lama Yeshe. We want to lead sentient beings to a higher education. We are an organisation that gives people the chance to receive higher education. We offer people what we have, the combined knowledge of Buddha's teaching and the modern way of life. Our purpose is to share our experiences of this. This emphasis on teaching is what makes Chenrezig much more comprehensive than just a normal temple. But what is Mahayana Buddhism and how is it different from other forms of Buddhism? Jason Boyett lists many divisions of Buddhism. Vajrayana Buddhism, which is a sect based on ritual texts called tantras that instruct individuals on the use of meditation, mandalas, ritual, and other techniques to achieve enlightenment. Pure Land Buddhism, which is a sect in China and Japan devoted to Amitabha, a saviour bodhisattva who rules a pure land paradise. Nichiren Buddhism, which was founded by the Japanese monk Nichiren, and Tibetan Buddhism, which emphasises tantras and mandalas as aids to meditation and developed in 7th century Tibet. But the main two divisions that occur within Buddhism can be divided into two primary schools of Buddhist thought, and these are Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. Winfried Cordian helps us understand this difference. He explains, the name Theravada is derived from an expression meaning tradition of the elders. This school remained relatively true to the teachings of the Pali Canon by maintaining a religion that's centred on monks. Hence, a monastic lifestyle is central to Theravada Buddhism, which is considered to be the ideal expression of Buddhism and the only path to nirvana. The other school of thought, known as Mahayana Buddhism, meaning the big raft, argued for less strict discipline and more openness towards the laity. And it is this form of Buddhism that has become popular in the West, and in particular at Chenrezig in Udlo. As one entered the grounds of Chenrezig, we walk up some stairs and read some texts as we approach the Gompa. These sayings are taken from the Jewel Lamp by Kunu Rinpoche Tenzin Gyaltsen, a text that praises bodhicitta, which Tim McKibben defines as the mind of enlightenment, the spirit of enlightenment, and the awakening mind, and is a defining characteristic that creates a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva being anyone who vows to become enlightened in order to relieve the suffering of all sentient beings. As we reach the top of these stairs, we find ourselves at a stupa, which is the Buddhist commemorative monument usually housing sacred relics associated with the Buddha or other saintly persons. And this is very similar to the veneration of saints within Catholicism, and encourages the person to reflect upon and imitate the virtues displayed by this spiritual master. Walking past this stupa, we find ourselves at the Nalanda Master's Garden, and we can walk around and contemplate some of the very famous bodhisattvas from the past, in particular the revered members of the Nalanda University. This university was founded in 427 CE and is considered the world's first residential university. It was home to 9 million books, attracted 10,000 students from Eastern and Central Asia, heavily devoted to Buddhist principles, and produced some of the era's most revered scholars. It has been so influential to Buddhism that the Dalai Lama once stated, "The source of all the Buddhist knowledge we have has come from Nalanda." This garden makes a bold statement that Chenrezig is definitely a Buddhist institute and not just a temple. Another way we can explore the Buddhist way of life is through engaging with the prayer wheel. The prayer wheel consists of a hollow metal cylinder, often beautifully embossed, mounted on a rod handle, and containing a tightly wound scroll printed with a mantra. At Chenrezig, there are two prayer wheels, a smaller one which spins with ease, and a much larger one which makes a ringing noise and is housed in a small structure that has deities that reflect the Mahayana cosmology. After all this, we eventually make our way to the Gompa. The temple is set out in such a way to allow for worshippers to practice meditation, reflect on the lives of the great spiritual masters, and the main focus of the entire temple is Chenrezig himself. Chenrezig is the Mahayana deity that sums up the entire goal of all Buddhist practice. He is a Lord endowed with complete illumination who refrains from entering the blissful state of nirvana to remain here below and save the creatures of the earth. This is why Chenrezig is located in the middle of the temple, much like how Jesus is located in the centre of a church, helping worshippers to focus on the main goal or main reason why they are there in the first place. Chenrezig is visualized in many forms with various numbers of faces and arms and various colors and ornaments. Randall Nadao points out that the Mahayana tradition developed a cosmology full of great beings with magical powers harnessed for the salvation of living beings, and that Chenrezig is male in Sanskrit scriptures. Yet in China and Japan, Chenrezig is portrayed in feminine form and can appear in over 32 forms depending on a devotee's particular needs. This is similar to how the Virgin Mary can appear in different forms all throughout the world to suit the customs and tastes of the culture she visits. In the temple and the whole surrounds of Chenrezig, we feel we have entered into a world of past enlightened bodhisattvas and assorted deities. But the devotional side of Chenrezig is only one side of the coin. Perhaps the main focus for the Institute is meditation or engaged Buddhism, which, as Nadal states, it could be argued that engaged Buddhism is a defining characteristic of Western Buddhism in the 21st century. The Chenrezig Buddhist Institute offers to the public a complete course in all things to do with Buddhism. They offer teachings, classes, retreats, yoga, art classes. They have a community of nuns living on the site, and anyone from the public can join them for morning or evening prayers, puja. They have a cafe, a bookshop, run many festivals, and try to create a sense of community and belonging for everyone. In short, coming to Chenrezig is like coming to a Buddhist university. The three jewels of Buddhism are the entities which Buddhists look for guidance, namely the Buddha, the Dharma, or the Buddhist teachings, and the Sangha, the larger community of practicing Buddhists. But Cousins points out that sometimes the Lama is often added as the fourth refuge in three jewels. And this is the reason why Chenrezig feels like a school or college, or a more complete way of life. As Lama Zopo Rinpoche said in San Francisco, FPMT is extremely fortunate, unbelievably fortunate. They have many qualified teachers, resident teachers who have spent their life in a monastery. It is this monastic, educational and community aspect of Chenrezig that one tangibly feels when paying a visit to this little oasis outside the township of Udalo. There is a much different feeling one gets when visiting a Taoist temple in Deagon, Brisbane. This temple is much more focused on rituals and devotion and much less interested in teaching or meditation. Its actual title is called the Evergreen Taoist Temple, and it belongs to a broader community called the Evergreen Taoist Church, which was established in Hong Kong in 1950. The Australian branch of this community was founded in 1988, and the temple in Deagon was built in 1991. So what is Taoism all about, and how do they worship? Taoism, or Daoism, in the words of Louis Comjathy, is an indigenous Chinese religion deeply rooted in traditional Chinese culture, and is quite complex to study. Comjathy adds, the study of Daoism often subverts easy explanations and totalizing interpretations. This is partially due to the diversity and relative inclusivity of the tradition. This is because the Dao is virtually unknowable itself. It is more relatable to unknowing than knowing, much like the mystical teaching of St. John of the Cross in the Catholic tradition. And this is why it is hard to discuss. Comjathy adds, many Daoists have embraced mysteriousness and delighted in obscurity, including paradox and apparent absurdity. Such a way of being in a practice and expression reasonably leads to perplexity among individuals unfamiliar with this tradition. So when I visited the Taoist temple in Deagon, I did not know really what to expect. Upon arriving at the Taoist temple, I accidentally walked through a retirement village which was connected to the temple. And as Comjathy observes, Chinese Daoists have tended to speak of their tradition in terms of a family. This sense of family was very evident throughout. The priest who showed me around was casual and chatty, the office ladies were warm and welcoming, and within the temple was a memorial hall dedicated to deceased ancestors. Comjathy goes on to say that Daoists always have tended to view tradition through the lens of the external three treasures, namely the Tao, scriptures, and teachers, and the latter often indicating the Taoist religious community as a whole. and anyone who excels in this threefold path is revered. So it appeared that tradition and family played a huge role in creating the atmosphere of this temple. This understanding helped me a lot. And with the typical Western way of thinking and asking questions, I want to know who founded this religion. But the answer was no one. Most scholars discuss Lao Tzu and Zhongzi as the founders, but upon studying the figures in the temple, these figures were barely mentioned, and there was no statue of them. Instead, there was a great devotion in the temple to Lu Sun Yang, who was referred to as Master Lu, who lived in 784 to 804 CE. Why was this? Komjathi gives me an answer. Rather, there are founders of specific movements, patriarchs of various lineages, key representatives and personages, including mortals and so forth. And seeing there is no actual founder of this religion, and it operates more like a big family, any person becomes more trained in the way becomes celebrated. Thus, there are masters like Zhang Daoling from the 2nd century who founded the Way of the Celestial Masters movement, and Zhang Sefeng, who was credited with the development of Tai Chi. And in this temple, in Degan, Master Lu's son Yang was highly venerated. The Holy Master Palace places Master Lu with 2 of his disciples, and is one of the main shrines in the temple. While Lu is an historical figure who is supposedly taught by the 8 immortals, who serve as mythological archetypes of immortality achieved through practice. This is very similar to the Mahayana Buddhist cosmology that blend mythological figures with historical spiritual masters. One of the main rituals practiced in this temple is the precious repentance of Patriarch Lu, which is the most popular and revered Taoist ritual text in China and all over the world. Another very sacred shrine is the Pure Trinity Palace. Like the Catholic Holy Trinity, these figures are Yu Qin, purest clarity, Shang Qing, highest clarity, and Tai Qing, greatest clarity. And the earliest references to these deities can be traced back to the texts such as the Dao Zhang, the Taoist canon, and Tao Te Ching, where they are depicted as manifestations of the Tao itself. So due to the highly revered nature of this shrine, rituals before this shrine are forbidden to be filmed or photographed. In essence, the most basic activities practiced in this temple are offerings to the gods, which include offerings of either food, water, flowers, incense, or candles, or rituals performed by priests. A common practice is the burning of incense, which was present before every shrine and also the central feature of the entire temple. Incense plays a symbolic role in Taoism, embodying purity, reverence, and connection to the divine. There were many other shrines throughout the temple, such as the precious palace of the Protector of the Faith, the shrine of the Red Pine Great Saint Wong, the palace of the Holy Lady of Mercy, and the figures displayed seem to be drawn from Chinese mythology, but what was the most impressive feature of the temple was the architecture. While Chenrezig seemed to spiritually focus one's intention on the Chenrezig god itself, the Taoist temples seem to be more concerned with creating a sacred space. Nadao points out that Chinese religion is primarily spatially orientated, and the Chinese landscape is full of sacred significance, and this feeling of being in a sacred, significant space was evident throughout. Nadao continues, the centerpiece of the temple is an incense burner where worshippers offer incense and prayers, and the temple courtyard is a gathering place for the community. While I was in the space, people were free to move around, place incense offerings, and meditate. And even though Taoism is hard to define in an academic sense, the temple seemed to be a place where the invisible and visible world connected. Nadao describes this feeling well. The temple is the place where the community comes together, where past and present meet, where the yang world of the living joins the yin world of the dead. In conclusion, both the Chenrezig Institute and the Taoist temples seem to combine mythological gods with spiritual masters from each religion and help the worshipper to enter into a sacred space seamlessly. The difference was that Chenrezig seemed more focused on teaching and learning, and that many of their rituals were intended to be lessons to help each individual reach the state of nirvana, like the enlightened being Chenrezig, while the Taoist temple had more of the atmosphere of a family, and all the rituals were performed only by ordained priests. What made the experience a bit more complicated was that apparently Master Lu Sun Yun, the main focus of the Taoist temple, was also quite fluent in Buddhism. As Joseph House Al writes, many famous legends concerning Lu Sun Yun, including one where, after an encounter with a Buddhist Chan master, Huang Long Huji, he abandoned inner alchemy for the direct practices of Chan, the Chinese precursor to Japanese Zen. This is probably why both temples possessed a similar style of structure and aesthetics. In particular, the ever present use of gold and the images of gods and goddesses, reflecting a broad expression of the Chinese vision of the divine. In the end, both were beautiful spaces that elicited a spirit of wonder and contemplation and helped the visitor think less about the material world and more about the world of the spirit.